Previously on Project RSV, you joined me collecting the beauty that had been stored in the garden, abandoned and unloved for 8 years. We got it back home, tried to start it, which unfortunately I didn't realise had contaminated fuel with water. Took the injectors apart, found a spider's nest under the throttle bodies, also discovered the reason it wasn't starting was a fuel hose had popped off inside the tank. With the bike running, I then decided to remove the baffle, which unfortunately also meant I got swarf in my eyes. But I think that brings us up to speed for episode 3. The first plan of action for Project RSV was to remove that belly pan, and it was not looking pretty underneath there at all. For those that watched episode 2, you may have noticed that I failed to bleed the rear brake caliper. Unfortunately, it is a little bit tricky with it fitted in place because of the location of the bleed nipple, but not impossible, especially for a home mechanic as I'll show now. So essentially what you need to do is remove the caliper so that the bleed nipple is at the highest point, and with that done you can then pull or vacuum like I've done here any air out of the system and get the rear brake working as intended. Another quick to do job was repairing the indicator lens, which thankfully Superglue came to the rescue. With a scheduled free Saturday in the diary, I dedicated all day to tinkering with the Aprilia RSV to get it as clean as possible. Now my plan was to get this as the final preparation before putting the bike back together. Essentially remove any grime that was hidden behind the fairings. So in that case, I needed to strip the bike down and go again with the washing process. Check out the size of that ECU. With the mirrors removed, I planned to take apart the nose cone assembly. I didn't realise at that point that I actually needed to remove the side pods and the air ducts for the side as well. As for me, I've never really worked on an RSV. I'd done an oil change on my one many years ago, but never really took it apart. And as I didn't have any sort of workshop manual, I'm pleased to report that it is pretty straightforward. Take your time and obviously bear in mind there's a lot of old plastic fittings on there that can easily shear or break. With the nose cone removed, I decided it's probably best to remove the clocks, especially if I'm going to be doing more pressure washing. As those that know in the comments, oh man, pressure washing Italian bikes, especially old Italian bikes, is probably not the best move, but I needed to deep clean everything, and the Aprilia did decide to give me a little love bite as well, as it was getting deep cleaned, which she wasn't happy about. Also wanted to remove the pipework sticker from the silencer. Unfortunately, the GoPro died, but I'm sure you can appreciate there's no longer a sticker there. Armed with the trusty built Hamber snow foam, I then again went over the bike and this time got a brush to get into all the gaps and cavities just to really give it a good deep clean. Pleased to report also that the ECU remained completely dry throughout my pressure washing spree. With the R1M chucked outside on this glorious sunny day, it was time to wheel the RSV back onto the ramp to begin this week's work. The first job being another deep clean inside and a good coating of ACF 50. For those that don't know, it's a brilliant corrosion correction spray and does really work well in these sort of situations when things have been left outside, especially like the valve covers where they've all gone oxidised. It really did make a big difference to these by simply spraying them on and wiping it all down. But do bear in mind, when we fire this up for the first time, it's gonna be smoky. As can hopefully be seen with the ACF 50 and the quick wipe over, it looks absolutely fantastic. It's actually shocked me just how well this bike has cleaned up. Dare I say it, looks almost new in there. Also treated the clocks to some ACF 50 as well to try and restore that flat plastic. I didn't fancy opening them up, especially with the old seals on there, but they look great too. Something that had been bugging me for a long time was the bar ends. Sadly, they decided they didn't want to come off on today's mission of simply unwinding the Allen key, so we'll come back to those in a later episode. With the clocks cleaned, it was time to refit them. I had wanted to do a quick electrical check on the bike for some time, and I don't mean the starting side of things as we know it's going to go, but more so things like indicators, brake lights, etc. So off went in the Gixxer battery again just to see if the circuits were all in order. In typical electrical fashion, the right indicator was playing up, and as can be seen here, a quick tap on the indicator lens and it starts working again. So obviously there's an issue either with the plug or the actual inside of the fitting, which was the case. So I literally removed the lens cover, cleaned the terminals and put it back in. Now for the exciting stuff, putting the clean bits back together. As you could have probably seen when I've taken the bike apart, the air ducts were looking pretty grim. And again, armed with the Snowfo and an agitating brush, I managed to remove all the dirt from those. I normally use some sort of engine bay degreaser, but unfortunately as I was out of stock on this in the garage, I made the decision to use the built Hamber snow foam, which worked absolutely perfectly. Repeating on the other side, it was simply a case of putting the air inlet temperature sensor and clipping it all back together. On to the front brake reservoir. Well, this is pretty commonplace for the old Brembo reservoir caps. As you can see, it's heavily oxidised, the paint's peeled off, not looking particularly fantastic. So the decision I made was to use a little brush on the Dremel just to sort of remove any flake in paint and oxidisation with some WD-40, bare it all back and then give it a quick coat of satin black paint. Now ideally I probably should have primered this first, but I wasn't really sure what the outcome was going to be. But I'm chuffed to bits with the finished piece, especially as it now no longer looks like it's been left outside for 8 years. With the reservoir cap complete, it was now time to bleed the front brakes. As I'd done the clutch master cylinder and the rear brake master cylinder, the front brake master cylinder now needed some love. The fluid colour was awful, so I got the vacuum bleeder back out again and gave the system a good flush with my current favourite ATE Type 200.4 brake fluid. Again, a quick clean up with some WD-40 on the wire brush on the reservoir screws, then meant it was all good to go back together. And I've got to admit, it does look fantastic for such a little amount of effort used. Finally, ending the evening, it was time to remove those pesky injectors again and try and hunt down the injector seals. It's the following evening. It's getting colder and colder in the workshop. We were down to 1 degree last night, so it's not as pleasurable to be in here at the moment, but we still have this problem that I can't get hold of these O-rings, and it was actually the one on the back here that had split. As you can maybe see there, I've upset it, moving it about. It's very brittle and old. I had a really good chat with Griff at AP Workshops. You guys have been brilliant in suggesting him. Really down to earth sound chap. Check out his YouTube channel. He has pulled these apart. So there's plenty of videos featuring stuff. And I had a good chat to him as well about the fuel line. But we'll come back to that in a later video. And as he said to me, as I was already aware, unfortunately, you cannot buy these gaskets from Aprilia. I had seen comment that apparently some Mitsubishi Evo seals fit these, but Griff said he hadn't seen a set fit. They're close, but they don't fit properly, so not ideal. And he came up with the best solution, which I think is going to be the best solution to get us back on the road, which is actually purchasing a full used throttle body kit with the injectors already on there, which is what I've just done now. So I've just ended up buying a kit for just over £40 here in the UK, which is probably what, well, I mean, the exchange rate is probably about $45, $50. The parts are cheap over here for like that. So I've ordered those. It's Monday night now. Hopefully by Wednesday, these will be here. And in the next video, with a bit of luck, you'll see a box arrive with some throttle bodies in it that we can put on and get the old girl finally running. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed. Armed with a hot cup of coffee, it was time to take the throttle bodies off to get it ready for the new ones to arrive. Let me know in the comments, what's your poison during a workshop evening? Tea, coffee, or even a beer? For me, I'd love the beer, but I'd get nothing done. So coffee is the second best option. So the good news is the throttle bodies have arrived in next to no time, and as you can see here, thankfully they are the right part number. And this is my own fault if I'd have got it wrong, but when I was briefly speaking to Griff from AP Workshops, he said something about them being slightly larger on a different model. I was like, oh God, last night I lay in bed and thought, hang on a second, these are from an R, mine's not an R. Is there something different between the R, or is it something that's a little bit later in the years? Oh God, I didn't know, so I thought that's going to be just what I need, is for the wrong ones to turn up. The weather this evening is disgusting, so it really would have just finished the night off. But the good news is the part numbers match up, everything looks fine. I mean, for the money, certainly can't complain. Comes with the injectors, throttle position sensor, yeah, regulator as well, absolutely everything there. So let's get these on and get the fuel tank on, and we should be good, just to see if this fires up and drain the oil. In order to help the throttle body slide back onto those rubber boots nice and easily, I made the decision to use some red rubber grease. Perfect for the job, and it was then just a case of refitting the throttle bodies in the order that I'd removed the old set. Now, as the bike had been completely covered in ACF 50, I was aware there was going to potentially be quite a lot of smoke on startup, but this is nothing to be alarmed by. But as always, I keep the fire extinguisher nearby just in case, especially as we were testing out the new full fuel system. So before I actually started the bike, I turned the ignition on and off a few times just to prime the fuel lines and make sure nothing was spraying out, as that is definitely something I didn't want going all over the exhaust manifold. So there we have it, boys and girls. She fires into life. I was checking around it, no fuel leaks. Obviously, we've got the nice big battery in there. A few guys in the comments mentioned upgrading. I think it's from the 12 to the 14, which we've got in there now. Yeah, wow, sounds wicked. Obviously scared the absolute out of me when I fired it, because it was running on one cylinder, I gather, because you could hear it just thudding away, and I was like, okay, it's fired, maybe it just needs a second, and then bang, out the exhaust. So got it right up to operating temperature. As hopefully you saw the cooling fans come on. I think it was 100 degrees, they kicked in on this. So now everything's up to temperature. Desperately need to drop that oil. So as mentioned, it's got a dry sump system, so it's not just a case of a sump that you undo to drop it out, but I've got the oil tray down there which has got some old oil in it, so it's not going to be a great indication of how it is. We know it's not going to be great, it's got to come out, and yeah, let's drop that now and complete the oil service. With the engine oil nice and hot, it was time to get the drain on. Simply undoing the 10mm on the bottom of the reservoir allowed for all the oil to be drained from the reservoir tank. Next, undo the reservoir filling cap, and go towards the crankcase drain. With the crankcase drain plug undone, it's next onto the oil filter housing cover. Back over on the bench, we can now have a quick look at the components. So reservoir, sun plug, gonna have to put a new washer on there. This is the one off of the crankcase of the engine. There's also a magnetic, a magnet on the top. Pleased to report there's no filings or anything on there. We've obviously got the reservoir cap, the oil filter housing cap, and you can also see the oil actually looks pretty good there. It's definitely not gammy at all. The bolts for that, the Jubilee clip off the pipe for the strainer, which I can't actually get off tonight. If you've seen with the spanner, I just didn't like the way that was not undoing. So I'm going to try it with some shock load on a small impact just to see if I can break it loose that way rather than shearing anything. And then obviously the oil filter. Back over at the bike, as I haven't got the oil service bits just yet, they have been ordered. Hopefully they'll be here tomorrow, latest Friday. You can have a look inside the oil filter housing. It's actually spotless in there, which is a really good sign. You'd expect it to potentially be a bit gammy given the amount of time it's been laid up. And then down here, there's a strainer that runs on that bolt. I mean, yeah, it doesn't feel happy coming off, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm thinking maybe an impact gun just to lightly try and gun it off, shock load it, as I say, rather than shear it, because this is only tin. This is not a solid tank, and I definitely don't want to destroy this trying to do it. So yeah, good night overall. We got it running. That's amazing news. It's running really well, really well. And then yeah, let's get the oil change completed, and it'll be on to the coolant. The service parts have turned up. Well, some of them have turned up. One or two I had in the garage. So I've gone for some more Silcoline coolant. I've used it years and years, to be honest with you. It's fairly well priced. It does the job. I had a bottle in the garage, which is brand new, and I've ordered two more, which they've looked like I've changed the packaging on. But I believe I might need 3.5 litres. So thankfully I have got another one, but it's in the loft. So I've got to go and climb and get that. We've got brand new set of spark plugs. Each cylinder uses 2 spark plugs, so zoom in on that if you need the part number. We've gone with 10W weight oil. The actual manufacturer guidelines are 15 weight 50. Like all things, you search online, it ends up becoming a right can of worms. You go down a garden path. But with this, we're going to run 10W40 because the climate in the UK is colder. We've got a brand new filter, brand new copper washers, brand new O-ring, and then the original parts are the oil filler cap, the reservoir cap. With the oil just above the maximum mark on the reservoir, you need to do a quick check to see if you've got any leaks. Obviously, we are going to check it once the bike's running. But good news, everything seems tight. What you've got to bear in mind is when we do that first fire, it's going to take 2 or 3 seconds for the oil filter to regenerate all the load in it, because ultimately it's a brand new filter in there now. When you first turn the key on, you're probably going to have the oil light on, or the oil pressure light on, for a second or two longer than you'd normally expect, but we'll keep a close eye on that. And then to check the oil, the bike needs to be completely up to temperature. Now, I've heard such mixed reviews on checking the oil level on these, but essentially the general consensus is that the bike should be red hot, i.e. 100 degrees on the fan kicking in, and you should see your level where you want it to be. So we've put 3.4 litres in there at the moment. I'm going to fire that up, and obviously we'll check it shortly, but I am going to do the coolant change first as well before everything gets red hot, and the spark plugs. With all the drains removed, you can now see I've got the new copper washers ready to go. So these little ones are from the radiator, and the big one is removed from the block itself. And we've obviously got the filler cap, which I've given a quick clean up as well. So essentially what we've got to do now is put it all back together, put the bike on the side stand, which apparently is the method to remove all the air from the system, and then fill it up with some new coolant. That looks like the coolant change is now being completed. For those that saw that clip there, I ended up taking the reservoir back off, undoing the bleed screw just in case there was any air trapped in there, because it's taken just over 2.2 litres, and I thought it would be at least 3 given the dual radiator setup. But a quick Google search confirms 2.2 litres is the right amount. So that's been topped up, that's now been closed and brimmed. It's just a case of going onto the plugs, firing it up, and obviously we'll keep an eye on that temperature level and coolant temperature as well, just so that we can know it isn't overheating. And then once it's all cooled back down tomorrow morning, I can then check to make sure it's full in the cap and level on the reservoir tank. With the tank back up in the air again, it was time to do the spark plugs. Not the easiest of access, but also not the worst. Unfortunately, my camera was soon dying, so I only got a few clips of this, but I think you get the gist of how it went together. Another thing I needed to address was the speedo, as it was reading in kilometers per hour, which here in the UK we use miles. So I needed to do the reset procedure, which is simply turn the ignition on, hold A till it flashes, let it go, press B, it will change to miles, press A again, holding it until it goes solid, and it's done, and we're good to go back to miles and the correct odometer reading as well. It's the following evening after the service. It just got too late last night for me to want to start the bike up and upset the neighbours even more than I already do, I'm sure. So today's video, we're going to fire it up and I'll show you quickly. We've got the oil pressure light there, which is on because obviously the engine's not running. We want to see that clear within a few seconds. If it doesn't, we've obviously got an oil circulation problem, and that's not good news at all. But yeah, let's fire it up and see how she sounds with a fresh oil and filter in her. With the RSV all being in good order, it was time to let it cool down, and I thought, you know what, I haven't fired the old 748 up in a while, let's get it done. With the bike cooled back down, it needed a little top up with coolant. I'd probably say less than 100 ml, as can be seen in this clip here. So it certainly seems to have bled itself through pretty well. And when it was running, I was feeling all the pipes to check they were all hot and that the thermostat was open. With the service all going to plan, it was time to put more bits back onto the RSV, mainly the airbox. Now, as it had unfortunately been sat outside, there was a lot of grime and crud on the airbox for the 8 years of being abandoned, just like everything on the bike. Thankfully, again, with the snow foam and a little brush, I managed to remove 99% of all the marks, stains, dirt, grime, and then get it back into the garage to be refitted. To my surprise, the bike had a K&N filter fitted and it was relatively clean. The only thing it lacked was oil, so using K&N's oil spray, I revitalised it back into good order. So that wraps up episode 3 of Project RSV. I hope you guys have been enjoying the series. If so, let me know in the comments. Obviously, we've still got a few more bits to do, but the next big push now, I'm going to try and get done in the next week and a half, is the bodywork. The colour scheme I've decided to go with is the black and red. Honestly, it's one of my favourites for the bike, so I'm hoping we'll be able to get some stickers sent out and get that sorted. So until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button.